I have a second channel, Cube Comp MTDX. Hey everybody, this we're going to be constructing a replacement TiViBox Slim. So here we have a gutted set-top box, just like the one that's up on the shelving unit up here. It's they use for playing back YouTube here in the tech room. So we have this laptop here. It's for parts. This got a motherboard in it that would be perfect for a setup like this. It's a very small, compact motherboard, and it has a cooling fan, the cooling system directly next to it. It has this little daughter board with an SD card slot and an extra USB port, as well as the power switch and power indicator separately. I think the power indicator separately. I can't remember for sure. About to figure that out. So when we look on the back of it, it has, if I can get it spun around because it's real top heavy right now, it has, and of course there's the cooling output. Got an Ethernet jack back here, HDMI, 2 USBs, as well as a line out or headphone jack. It can also be used as a line out. And you got this power jack over here, which could be relocated to a different spot whenever necessary. So this motherboard, I've already tested it by disconnecting the video connector for the display and running it just off of this external video connector. So what I did is I did want to mention, unplugged this, took it into the living room, hooked up to the TV with the HDMI connector, and tested it with just the external video connector, and it did treat it, or at least in the BIOS, it treated it as a primary display. So that's one thing out of the way. So one of the challenges with this will be not necessarily fitting this into this case. I mean, I think it should fit fine. I'll have to open this up to be sure. And I think it should fit okay. I just want to do a quick little test fit just to make sure the motherboard does have enough space in here, which I think it should. Should be able to pull this right out. Okay, we still got the power connector attached to it. Let's see if I can work that out. There we are. And yeah, it should be fine. The trick here is, so the next trick with fitting this thing in here will be mounting this to something. We can't just mount this right to the bottom, obviously, because it's metal, and of course metal would ground it out. But what I was thinking was potentially cutting out a portion of this laptop assembly, just cutting out from like around through here, and saving that portion and using that to mount the motherboard to. That way, to be mounted on something that's that's an insulator, and just have it mounted inside this set-top box. Probably have to mount it off to the far side like this, or something of that matter. And I should have enough space left over to mount a solid-state drive in here. So this motherboard has a hard disk connector, one of these two. It's right there. And what I can do is I have a connector for that would be used to attach the solid-state drive to the motherboard. Oh, excuse me, it's this one over here. I was pointing at the wrong thing. It's on the wrong. I was looking at the wrong side. So this here is that's the hard drive connector for SATA hard drive, and I have a cable that I can use. So I'm just thinking, actually, what I'll do is I'll mount it on this side over here. I can just plug it. I should be able to plug it right in, and should have enough room. So it's a M-SATA to SATA adapter. I should be able to fit this right in here, so that way I can easily just pop the cover off the box if I need to access the the SSD or whatever, and again have easy access to it. So this motherboard has 4 gigabytes of DDR3 on board. It's just one SODIMM. So this was more of a budget-in based system, just an Intel Celeron, and you can tell it's a low power draw based, or at least a low TDP processor, because of the cooling system is just not all that. It's not all that spectacular, but it should be good enough to do the job for what this thing does. So yeah. So what I'm thinking is, if I can mount this, probably like this right here, and as far to the left as possible. That should give me enough room, or just somewhere in here. I should have enough room left over to where I can mount the hard drive, and also be able to mount a Wi-Fi card or any other accessory into this PCIe slot over here. So that's something I got to think about. Now for the drive, the SSD, I do have a cable. This is more or less a SATA power, SATA data extension cable. It plugs right into this, and I could use that to mount the hard drive however I wish. So that's something else I could do. So I'll have to figure it out, and when I make some progress, I'll post I'll post an additional video clip on here. So another thing before I stop is, the next challenge will be mounting this somewhere in the back of the system, because I'm going to mount it toward the back because this cable is not long enough for it to reach the front. Mount this to where this USB port and SSD card slot are actually pointing toward the back of the system, and also soldering a power switch in place of this surface mount button, which I think I'm pretty certain I could figure that out. So once I make some progress on this thing, I'll go ahead and continue on with this video. Okay, everybody, so what I did is I have pulled the laptop motherboard out of the laptop, and I also used these 10 snips to literally cut out the portion of framing from the laptop that I need for this. So this is just sitting in here right now. I haven't actually, of course it's not done yet. I still got to actually cut into the back of this to open this up. This time I would like to be able to retain at least this this screw here, or the screw hole here and the screw hole here. That way I can still mount the cover like it would normally be mounted, unlike that thing up there, which is just glued together. I prefer to have something that's a bit easier to crack into. So I'm going to try to retain this screw hole here and this screw hole here. I'm not 100% certain how that's going to go, but we'll just have to, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. That's the biggest challenge of this whole thing. So essentially what I got to do here is I got to make an opening for this cooling vent right here, as well as these 5 connectors. So really all I would need to do is take this 10 snips and open this up a bit, and also open this spot here up a bit. And I could mount the power jack in one of these existing holes, probably like, let's see, that right there for example, or right there. I could fit it in a number of different spots on the back of this case. I just had to glue it into place. But it does seem like it's doable. And also, I forgot to mention, I have soldered in a power switch, so it's on this board right here. I gutted down the original button, and I was able to solder these leads on here, and this now powers on and off with this push button. So I can mount the push button up in front of the system, kind of like that one up there. And on top of that, I managed to solder an LED onto where the original power indicator LED used to be. I left the charging indicator right there because obviously this will never be charging again because there's no battery. No need for that. This does not have a hard drive activity indicator. I'm kind of disappointed about that. Well, that's pretty much to be expected with modern day computers. They just consider that a non-essential indicator when, in my opinion, it is. But it is what it is. So, the next stage I'm going to be opening this up. As mentioned, I'll open up the back of this case enough to where I can access these ports, as well as give this thing some breathing room. And I think once that's done, well, then I'd have to move on to mounting the SSD. And I'm going to be using an mSATA SSD in this system. It was part of a donation of components from a very generous fan of the channel, and I'm going to be using that in this system. It's a he sent me a 64 gigabyte mSATA SSD as well as a mSATA to 2.5 inch SATA adapter. My idea is once I use the mSATA adapter to copy over the files, I'm going to permanently mount it in here as needed, and what I'll do is I'll probably just go on Amazon or somewhere and buy me another mSATA adapter. That way, if I ever need to do anything with the drive, I mean, the idea is I can just crack this thing open and easily pull out the SSD if needed. So, now it's not the same as that one up there. I have a 2.5 inch SSD in that one, and I mounted it to where it's behind that little door that you open. You open the door, and you can actually remove the SSD without having to open the box. So that's the plan for this thing so far. We'll keep on going to see how we do here. Okay, everybody. So it's practically almost done. All I gotta do at this point is just mount this SSD. So this is actually a 256 gigabyte mSATA solid state drive. I thought it was a 64. I'm not sure why. But yeah, so the old TV box, I've been having some issues with it here very recently. Last week we had a power outage, and what happened was that the substation, one of the voltage regulators, failed. So when they turned the power back on, we were getting 130 volts instead of 120 volts. And it just, for some reason, not sure if this thing got a power spike or what happened, but I mean, it still works. It's just bizarre. And actually, I mean, the failure of this thing could be totally unrelated to the power issue. This is an older SSD. I got it, I think, around 2011 or 2012. It's an old Samsung 1.8 inch 64 gigabyte micro SATA solid state drive. This thing had at least 30,000 hours on it, something like that. It had a pretty good bit of hours on it. And I'm thinking something's going on with the controller in this guy. I was able to actually do a clone of the data on this thing, so that way I was able to save my TiViBox installation, and I was able to migrate it over to this thing. So now I can finally actually get this mounted in permanently. And what I'll do is I'll just pick up another one of these mSATA adapters. That way, if I need to image or do anything with a mSATA solid state drive, all I gotta do is use the adapter. And the way this is set up is I can use the factory cover for this box, unlike that thing up there where it's, as I mentioned earlier, it's just all glued together. This one here took a little bit different approach. So the only thing I don't like, well, at least as far as connectivity goes, since this is not a desktop motherboard, it don't have the typical headers you would have for like your USB ports and stuff like that, so I couldn't just mount front USB ports. The only other board this thing had was that one right there, and this little ribbon cable would not have reached up front. I mean, it would have been cool if I could have mounted this like up in here, but this little cable was just not long enough, so I had to mount it toward the back like it is, as you see. So I've also, when I installed this board, I left the provision in place for a Wi-Fi card. Because that way I can install wireless card in this thing and give this thing Wi-Fi functionality. That way I don't have to have it plugged into an Ethernet cable. Matter of fact, if I actually went ahead and hooked and set this thing up for Wi-Fi, it might actually get faster network speeds than the 10100 fast Ethernet LAN that this board has built into it. So, something to consider. But here's a look at the back of it, and you can see, as I mentioned, I just took, or as you may have seen earlier in this video, I took and used those tin snips there to just cut out the section of the laptop frame I needed to hold the board. That way it would retain all of the it would retain the mounts for the motherboard. That way I could have set it right in here and have all these hookups. And I did some testing with this thing. It does play back YouTube just fine. I mean, the Celeron processor, I have to note in the description what model of CPU this is. I think it's an N2040 Celeron, 2.5 or 2.6 gig, but also it's actually in the same family as like the Atom, because you can tell by the way the cooling system is on this thing. It doesn't have much of any cooling system, and it doesn't. I mean, the fan. For a good little bit, the fan just stayed off, and eventually the fan kicked on, so it doesn't really generate that much heat. So it's also a very low power draw CPU, which is, I think, perfect for something like this. It plays back YouTube just fine. Didn't have any issues with that. So that's pretty good there. Now the only issue I'm having with this thing, and it's nothing I can fix, it's just the limitation of the graphics on this thing, is I cannot scale this thing's graphics. I can't adjust the width. I can't adjust the length and width of the video picture, because on my TV, the most of the taskbar is cropped off, and some of the left and some of the right is cropped off. But within the YouTube lean back interface, it's fine. I actually I pulled up some videos just to see how things looked, and it was okay. So it's only a minor inconvenience, but so this thing offers just enough functionality. I mean, just enough connectors. I mean, it offers HDMI, which has HDMI audio, and it also offers a standard headphone jack as well. We have 3 USB ports, and if I needed more ports, I could use a USB hub. It does have one USB 3 port right there, the blue one. So that's nice. That's cool to see. Mounted the power jack right here, so that way I can just plug right in with the laptop's AC adapter. So yeah, this is rather interesting. It's a laptop motherboard. It functions perfectly fine without the laptop keyboard, without the laptop touchpad, without the laptop display. Now, I will say that in the past I did try something like this with a different laptop motherboard. I think it was from an HP, and it was the experience, or at least the initial testing, just didn't go quite as I'd hoped. With that one, it refused to. It still wanted to treat the LVDS connector, or this connector right here, the video connector, as the primary, and the external video as a secondary. But this one, it's perfect. I can't. I mean, well, almost perfect. After I mentioned the minor issue with the display scaling, but other than that, I think this is going to work out really well. So now that the glue gun is heated up, or should be heated up, yeah, it's hot. It's hot now. I will go ahead and mount this SSD. Now this enclosure, or this adapter, I should mention, it's all encased in plastic, so if it rests up against the motherboard, it's no big deal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the connector, this connector right here, as well as this part of the box, as sort of a bracing mount. we'll see how this goes. Let's go ahead and, you know, I had to include some part of me building this thing in the video. So last night I was just bound determined to get it done, so I didn't really do much video like I usually do with these kinds of things. And this should give us just enough room to close the cover on this old set-top box. You know, we don't need this to be super duper tight, but just enough to hold it in there, really. I also want to make it to where I can remove it without too much difficulty if necessary. And we give that a second to dry. Okay, the glue is finally cured, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a picture of the inside of this thing before I close it up, and then we're going to get it closed up. Okay, let's go ahead and put the cover back on. This will actually be the first time that I've tried to put the cover back on the thing since I slapped it all together. It's kind of finicky on how it actually goes on. Okay, so now I just got to put the screws back in. Okay, so it's all back together now. Here's a look at the front of it. And it's funny, you just looking at it, I mean, with the exception of this little spot here and that LED, you think this is just some old DirecTV set-top box. But when you turn around and look at the back, you obviously notice then it's like, oh, it's a bit more than the set. Yeah, the feeling of accomplishment when you slap together something like this. Take a laptop motherboard and parts of the laptop itself and just remake it into something totally different. So yeah, the laptop, by the way, I forgot to mention that laptop, the keyboard was messed up, and it was one of those models where the keyboard was integrated into the whole palm rest and it would have been kind of a pain to change, and this was a pretty low-end machine. So I think I mentioned Intel Celeron N2040, I think is the CPU that's in this thing. Not very great as far as performance goes, but it should and seems to be doing fine enough for playing back YouTube on the TV. So you can't really complain there. So let's go and get this thing back into the living room and get it plugged up. Okay, let's go ahead and start it up. So I should mention I already got one of those set up and ready to go, so it was just the process of moving the existing installation over to this machine and installing a few drivers, that kind of stuff. Yeah, a little Sauron CPU ain't the fastest in the world, but it does a job good enough for this thing. So yeah, aside from that one cooling fan, this thing is totally solid state. Aside from that cooling fan, there's no moving parts in this thing, so not too much to go wrong with it. Yeah, I'm not sure why I got a mouse cursor on the screen. That wasn't a problem with the previous setup. Let me try doing this. Let's just log back out, log back in. It may have to do with the fact this thing has a touchpad driver, or it's something that matter. That's something I have to look into. Have to work out all the kinks, because the previous system was, of course, a desktop-based system, and Windows 10, the way it works is when you don't have a mouse plugged in, it doesn't show a cursor. But when you plug in a mouse and start moving the mouse, the cursor shows up and stays there. Now it's interesting, the cursor's not there right now, but that's something I have to look into. So this is CubeComp MTDX, my other channel. There's CubeComputer channel, and we'll just play back one of my videos here. Hey, I have a second channel, CubeComp MTDX. It's not too bad. Hey everybody, those who have been watching my videos since probably 2017 may recognize this system, well, the case that it's in. I was using this chassis there for a while before I resurrected the Plexi. So yeah, not bad. It's funny, aside from that LED, it looks just like a typical old crappy DirecTV set-top box. So anyways, I think that wraps up for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Well everybody, that's it for this video, but don't forget there's a lot more interesting stuff on the channel to check out. Also, if this is your first time visiting this channel, feel free to subscribe to CubeComputer channel, and also don't forget to tick the bell so that way you'll get notified of new video posts. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, but if you really didn't like it, there is the alternative option available as well. Also, feel free to check out my second channel, CubeComp MTDX. There you'll find videos about bicycling, weather, elevator tours, and all sorts of other neat, interesting stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Feel free to come back, and thank you for your support.